Hi, my name is Chris, aka ThePhilosophersGames, and today we look into Tales of the Shire. Before we start, a few hints. I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it in his books. Also, I try to avoid spoilers, and I also got a review code for the game, so I could play a few days before it officially released. I will focus here mostly on the review side of things and go into a bit more detail when it comes to the lore that we can see in the game in a separate live stream. You find it in the live stream tab on YouTube or on my Twitch channel. But let us start. Tales of the Shire is a difficult game for me to review because it is part of the cozy game genre, I would call it, and that is a genre I usually don't play myself. I usually enjoy more complex games that I would call try-hard games, where there's competition, where there's challenge, where there's complex mechanics that you have to learn and to master and so on. But all of this is not really in these cozy games, to be honest. And also far less in Tales of the Shire. So it was an interesting experience from somebody who plays, I don't know, through Elden Ring on a level 1 character to playing Tales of the Shire. The contrast was quite strong, but it was an interesting experience nonetheless. So what does a cozy game need to achieve? I think obviously it needs to be cozy, so not very stressful, relaxing, but still fun in a way, but it does not have to challenge you so much that you can't focus on anything else, but on a way you also want to potentially immerse yourself into the world. It also helps if these kind of games are cute and adorable in a way. On top of that, this specific game, Tales of the Shire, has the Lord of the Rings license and you play as a hobbit. So it would definitely help if you play this game and feel like a hobbit, and if it also hits the right notes that are associated with a hobbit. Food, for example, the landscape, planting things. Of course, also the characters, the lore, the world building, and so on. I think several of these aspects Tales of the Shire definitely achieves. When I saw the first trailers of the game, I was a bit worried about the art style and how it looked, just considering its visual fidelity, but now seeing the final product, it definitely looks great, and the art style works perfectly fine for me, I have to admit. I would definitely say the game is cozy. It is not stressful at all. You have a lot of time. It has a very slow pacing. You can't do anything wrong really. And further, you also have a focus on food which fits the Hobbit theme. And because we are small hobbits in the Shire, nothing world-changing really happens there in this game. So don't expect too much complexity when it comes to the quest lines and stories that exist in this game. It is just hobbits planting crops, cooking for each other, and troubles kind of connected to this and the village. Also with some funny and cute dialogue here and there, which is unfortunately not voiced. Let me give you some examples where the game shines, in my opinion, in the mentioned aspects. First of all, we have wandering through this map of Bywater, which is in the Shire, and collecting things, foraging, finding food that you can later cook and explore the map is a lot of fun, actually works. It's very cute, cozy and relaxing, exactly what you want from a game like this. One thing that could be a bit annoying for some people is that there is no jump button. As a result, going through the areas is sometimes very restricting. The game has a very specific idea where you can go and where not. As a result, if there's a small obstacle in the way, you have to go all the way around. You can't just jump over it, even though it looks like going over that should not be that big of a deal. Then there's another cool feature in the game that replaces classic UI element markers that show you where to go. So instead of showing you, I don't know, an arrow on the screen, you have to go there and then you have to go right or something. The game uses little blue birds instead that just fly naturally and land somewhere in front of you and show you the way. And if you have to go, for example, right, there's usually a signpost that shows in multiple directions and it lands on this part of the signpost that shows right, so you know, I have to go right there. It needs a bit getting used to, in my opinion, because you have to kind of interpret where the birds are landing and what to look out for a moment, but at some point you are used to it and it becomes second nature, I think. And of course it also works if you put like a marker on the map, then these birds show you the way to this marker. It works pretty well, for the most part. The sound design is also pretty good. Every UI element has their distinctive sounds and sometimes even different sounds. Further, you also have great music in this game, even though it's not the big Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings film music, but they did their own thing and it's totally fitting and works well. Though, to be honest, it could have gotten more tracks when it comes to the music, but overall I'm quite happy with it. Biggest point of criticism when we talk about sound is that the dialogues between characters and so on are not voiced. You have these basic noises they make when they start a sentence to sometimes also express their current mood, but that's basically it. Which is not too unusual for cozy games as far as I'm aware, like Stardew Valley or Animal Crossing or something like that also has no voiced dialogue as far as I'm aware. But I think this game in particular would have profited a lot from voiced dialogue, to be honest. For hobbits, eating and having meals together is one of the most important things. As a result, in this game, cooking is by far the most complex mechanic that you have in this game. So if you don't like cooking, maybe the game is not for you. You collect ingredients and have different recipes. Every season has different ingredients that can grow or appear there, and also each ingredient can have different qualities. And if you combine ingredients of higher qualities, you obviously get a better meal. Still, the cooking process itself also gives you some control over how smooth a meal is, how chunky it is, how well tended it is, how crisp it is, and so on and so forth. There's quite a bit of complexity in this here. And as a result, you definitely have to experiment a bit with the cooking and understanding the mechanics by trying something out here and there. Though the game also explains everything relatively well to you. Another big mechanic of the game is decorating your hobbit hole and customizing it, so your home. And that also works fairly well, though don't expect the complexity of other games. Like, I also like, for example, playing Raft at times, and what you can build there is sometimes quite impressive, but you don't have that amount of customization options in direct comparison. It's not like you can build a small shack out of other parts or something. It's just you have a lot of decorative items that you can place in your hobbit hole, and you can change the color of the wall. You have a small selection there. That's basically it. It's fairly simple, but I think if you like The Lord of the Rings and you like the Shire and how, for example, back-end looks, you definitely find many items you also know from the films in some way also in this game, and can build your cozy little hobbit hole as a result. So that works fairly well, but it's not like you can customize the layout of your hobbit hole or something. You can unlock new areas in your hobbit hole and make it bigger and so on. Also make your garden bigger and unlock stuff there. That is possible, but it's predefined. The only option you have is kind of filling it with decorative items and plants and so on. I have to admit, at the beginning I planned on mostly ignoring this feature, but ended up using it more than I anticipated. So that definitely speaks for it, though some people might want more complexity in this. You can't terraform the Shire and you can't build complex structures out of the existing decorative items. There are definitely limits to it. I would attest the game being cozy and relaxing, and I also had my fun with the game, despite some areas where things could have been improved. However, if you have listened now to this point, you definitely expect a catch. What's the catch now with Tales of the Shire? So let us come to the more negative points and then see at the end where things are. One of my biggest points of critique, and luckily this can be patched, is the performance of the game. It runs not great. On the highest graphics settings in the game, I can get Tales of the Shire to run at 60 frames per second using the highest settings at 4K resolution, which sounds good or decent for most people. But there's some context to it. I need to use an upscaler called FSR3, which is available in this game. For people who have knowledge about these terms, DLSS is not available in this game, only FSR3. And set FSR3 to performance to get stable 60 FPS frames per second. That is a problem. Just for context, there's this technically impressive and visually absolutely stunning and complex game called Cyberpunk 2077. If I run Cyberpunk now with the highest settings, without ray tracing or path tracing of course, also at 4K resolution, and put as well FSR3 to performance, I get a better frame rate in Cyberpunk than in Tales of the Shire, even though Cyberpunk is by far, or should be, the far more demanding game of the two. On paper, Tales of the Shire should run on a potato. That is unfortunately, in its current state, not the case. Though this can be patched, and I hope it will, but just to give you the perspective, if it does not run well on my machine, then on your old laptop you might have even bigger trouble hitting a decent frame rate, so you can have stutters and a very terrible experience there. I hope they fix that. That should not be the case, and we also see many reports of people and reviewers having performance issues with the game, even on high-end computers. Though in these cases it is possible that some people play it on a lower-end computer and it runs perfectly fine. It's just a hint that something is wrong with the optimization with certain graphics cards and so on, so they might have to improve things here and there. Other than that, when it comes to technical issues, I had not a single crash in about 17 hours of playtime. I also had no other game-breaking bugs in the game. Maybe here and there a little bug where the menuing was a bit strange, or where things didn't align in animations perfectly, something like that, but beyond that, nothing too big. Leaving now the technical issues aside, and those are definitely a big minus point for the game, because those things should be sorted out on release. Of course, if there's a very unique combination of, CPU and GPU that cause trouble, that is unpredictable. You can't cover everything, but it seems like that performance issues are widely spread. Talking now more about the gameplay. I think one big issue with the gameplay is that it might be a bit too shallow to carry over the full length of the game. At the beginning, when everything is new, you explore things, you unlock new mechanics, you find things out, and that is interesting, but after some time, I personally definitely noticed this around the, let's say 10 plus hour mark, things got really repetitive. I mean, they were kind of repetitive before, but at some point you notice, okay, is there more to it? Are there more things happening, or is it always the same in every little quest you do? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. In my opinion, in the last, I assume third, they definitely ran out of steam in the main mission. And the tasks you have to do are suddenly very, very similar and kind of stretched out. Suddenly, you have to cook a meal, wait a day, cook another meal, wait a day, cook 2 meals, wait a day, and so on. So, of course, I kind of tried to rush a little bit through the main story, and if you play the game, I would recommend not doing that. Just keep the main story as kind of a side attraction that you follow if you feel like it. But if you just follow the main story very consequently, you definitely notice, okay, they're definitely stretching the playtime here a lot. And in my opinion, that is not too interesting. I think the game stagnates a little bit too early and then drags on for too long to stretch playtime. Like, a good way to describe it is, like, if you're new to a game, then at the beginning you start at a specific point, and from there different paths branch out, and the game spreads. That can be gameplay mechanics, that can be story elements, characters, and so on. Everything that kind of is part of video games starts to spread, and you have to explore it. And this is exciting because it's new and there are things to discover and so on, or to learn in the game and to become better at. And once you reach this base level, you notice, oh, there's more, and the game starts spreading in further directions and branching out further and becomes more and more complex. And there are always these different steps and milestones you hit in the game. Of course, this can't go indefinitely, so at some point this has to stop and you have to use this massive, hopefully massive foundation to end the game, to complete the story, to defeat the final boss or whatever. That is how video games are usually built. And Tales of the Shire kind of misses a bit the sweet spot of stop the spread, and then finding its end. It just drags on and on and on, and it feels like it really is just stretching the playtime, and there's nothing new you have to learn. And that's a bit unfortunate. I think the foundation is actually not that bad of this game. It just needs a bit more, or it has to stop earlier. But then I guess people would definitely criticize the playtime of the game. I understand that these kind of games also have often no true ending. You can just play them in theory indefinitely. However, my criticism is a bit that I already feel like the repetitiveness inside the main story of the game and not outside of it. Like, it's, I think, not too unusual if you completed everything there is to complete and just play the gameplay loop further because you enjoy it and it's fun. And at some point you also notice, okay, now it gets repetitive, I've done it a million times, I'm done with the game, I'm moving on, which is completely fine. However, this feeling I already have playing the main story, so that's not a good sign for what comes after it, I think. It also does not help that most of the quests in the game are fetch quests, so there's not that much variety in the tasks you have to do in the game. On the other hand, this game is potentially not meant to be played like I just played it. For this review, I tried to unlock as much stuff as possible in a short amount of time and rush through the main story. That is not what you should do. Take your time, play in potentially smaller sessions, waste some time in a good way on decorating your Hobbit hole, cooking meals for some of the characters in the game, and go on a hike, explore the game, collect some mushrooms in the forest, and so on. If that sounds interesting to you, in Middle-earth, in the Tolkien Lord of the Rings universe, and exploring and finding some Easter eggs and cool references to the books, then this game might be for you and you might have a good time with it. It's definitely cute, it's cozy, it's relaxing for sure, but like I said, at some point for me it stagnated a little bit too early, and it felt like I've seen now everything. Is that all there is? Oh, the main story is not done yet. Then I potentially complete the main story and never touch it again. So that's a bit unfortunate. Though, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm also not the perfect type of player for this kind of game. So keep this please in mind. I could also imagine that there are many Lord of the Rings fans out there that are not that deep into video games, and for them maybe a more simple approach, as in this game here that does not get too complex, is interesting enough to explore, especially under the imagination of immersing themselves into the Shire, into Middle-earth, and kind of relax a little bit playing this in shorter and smaller sessions than I did. As a result, I can see this working for some people, and maybe what I definitely would do is wait a patch or two, and if you plan on buying it for the Nintendo Switch, for example, check out some Switch reviews that focus on the technical side of things and see if it runs well there. Otherwise, same recommendation, just wait a patch or two and then it should run fine. Another thing I found a bit unfortunate is also that there are some NPCs, so some Hobbit characters standing in the world, but you can't interact with them if you press the interaction button. Sometimes randomly they play like a line of dialogue which you can read then, but you can't trigger it if you interact with them. You can't do anything with them. They are just decoration, and this makes the world feel a little bit less alive than it should. Just this option to interact with them, and even if it's always the same line they are saying, it always feels, in my opinion, better if you can interact with them. Same with the main characters. If you are not in a quest, you very often can't do much with them. They don't have some interesting dialogue or something to say simply, and they don't have voiced dialogue anyway, so there's not really an excuse for not adding more dialogue lines, which might add to the world building and so on. Because as soon as you are out of the quest with certain characters, you can interact with them, but they just say hello, and then you can just click on goodbye, and then you leave. It would be interesting if you actually could unlock different parts of dialogue where you learn a little bit more about those characters and the world. As a result, everything is a little bit shallow in this game, which is unfortunate. I hope this gives you a decent overview over Tales of the Shire, its strengths, but also its weaknesses. Further, I guess this question also could come up: how correct is the lore depicted in Tales of the Shire? And since the developers have access to the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, which are the main sources for every information we have about the Hobbits, for the most part, it is fairly accurate, I would say. If there was one detail you could criticize a little bit, then Gandalf wears Narya, which is true, but he would hide the ring from mortal eyes, so we should not be able to see it on his finger. Galadriel did basically the same to Nenya in the books as well. Then there's another interesting detail, and I'm not sure if this is a reference or just an accident, but one of the female hobbits has a wooden leg. And that sounds unusual for Tolkien's world, but in very early versions of The Lord of the Rings, so Tolkien, when he wrote the book, went through many iterations of chapters and especially characters, and in early versions there was a character called Trotter, which later would become Strider. And Trotter would wear 2 wooden shoes, and it's later revealed in the story that those were actually not his shoes. He was once captured by Sauron and was tortured, and he lost his feet due to the torture there. And these were not just his shoes, these were actually his feet. A bit grim, but potentially an interesting reference here. Also, Trotter was a hobbit, but we will discuss these lore references in a lot more detail during a live stream that I will link in the description once it aired. So keep your eye on the live tab here on my YouTube channel. There will be a live stream where we discuss Tales of the Shire lore a little bit and maybe play a bit along. So if you're interested in more lore details, check that out. It will also be streamed on Twitch, of course. Further, if you like video game stuff, check my games channel, would be much appreciated. Also linked in the description. It's at ThePhilosophersGames. Further, huge shoutouts to all my supporters. Thank you so much for your support and your patience. Haven't done much here on this channel. I hope I can reactivate the lore Q&A streams and bring some more content here also on the main channel again. Currently focusing too much on the games channels I have, especially the German Twitch channel. However, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe, like and comment. I would be interested in your experience with the game performance-wise on your system, especially the other systems like the consoles and the Switch and so on. That would be interesting to know how it runs there, and tell me also what you think of Tales of the Shire. Again, thank you for watching, and see you people next time. Goodbye.